Code Sports Talk, and I am your host, Andrew Wright. And over in his living room is my co-host, Cody Johnson. Cody.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Thursday evening for those listening in the future. We're recording this on Thursday night, and honestly, this was a late inning decision here by Drew to do Drew Code, which I'm very glad to do because we've had a lot of miscues the last couple of weeks, but we're back for the time being, and I'm very excited for it. Just before we get started, though, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. Not Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. Good gosh. See, this is what happens when we're gone for so long is I forget the whole spiel. So go find the podcast on all the links down below. So I'll start with there. Anyways, Drew, man, I've actually missed you. I haven't talked to you a lot in the last week or so because you've been busy being a homeowner. So what's going on, man? What's new?
Literally the same thing over. I almost said a naughty word. Same thing over and over again. Yeah, we're just as much work as we can at the house. We're getting ready to move in. We thought we were going to be able to move in this weekend. Some things kind of backtracked that, so it looks like for sure, well, not for sure, but hopefully next weekend we can actually move in stuff. But we're at least going to be moving things over to the new house this weekend, mainly Sunday. Probably nothing on Saturday. So we're just going through the motions right now, trying to get the little touches here and there. We were going to move in this weekend because pretty much everything was done. We just had a few things that we had to do that we really just have to kind of we could do whether we were in the house or not. And the issue became some electrical issues in our kitchen, and so we called the electrician that we've had, and he's unfortunately able to do it next week. So that kind of puts a damper on things because if we want to make food at our house, which we definitely are going to want to, unfortunately, we cannot use, we wouldn't be able to use the electrical in the kitchen. So, I mean, we could move our microwave in the room if we want to, but we're just going to, push it back a little bit, which kind of sucks because we were kind of starting, things are happening. We're going to go, but, yeah, it is what it is. I think we've waited them, not concerned about having to wait a little bit longer. I am sorry. We're probably going to have connection issues. So if you hear us talk over each other, lead reaction, my bad. I'm not at my new house yet. I got the good connections. So I actually went to my house today just before we started this, and I was like, man, I should have just brought my stuff here and just done. My wife was like, oh, well. So, yeah. All right. But anyway.
That's cool. Yeah. Hopefully, if I do a good job editing the show, no one will notice except you and I. So we'll see how it goes. I thought I did a pretty good job on the last one. And then come to find out, I accidentally left in the count-in parts to 2 sections. For those, to peel the curtain back, guys, sometimes when we start the show, we count ourselves in, and then that's what helps me know when to cut. And I think there was 1 or 2 spots. I forgot what topic it was on. I forgot to cut it out. So for those that got to listen to the podcast the first day, you guys got the not so well edited version of it, and then I corrected it the next day. So, but we got a good show to talk about, you guys. We have Australian Grand Prix that we're gonna talk about, and then obviously we have a race coming up in a couple of weeks that we'll probably talk about. We also have NBA playoffs. Lakers made it into the play-in. We'll talk about in a second. And then obviously baseball, which is what Drew's been chomping at the bit about. And he has his MLB top 5 power rankings that he's going to unveil. So, Drew, without further ado, do you want to kick us off with the first topic?
All right, Cody. So we missed a couple of weeks back now. We missed talking about the Australian Grand Prix. And it was a doozy, man. It was absolutely a doozy. 3 red flags, which actually I came to find out was the first time in a Formula One race that 3 red flags had come out, which was kind of insane when you kind of think about some of the races that there have been, and some of the things that have happened over the years, the crashes and whatnot. Like, it's just kind of amazing and surprising that there hasn't been more. But nonetheless, it was a very impressive. I don't want to say impressive. It was an interesting race. Let's say that, because I just felt like there was a lot that went on that I really do feel like there were certain things that maybe they didn't need to do when the race was already chaotic as it was. Verstappen ends up winning a big podium for Lewis Hamilton, which was huge. I was so stoked for that. And he, at a point, had a really good chance at actually getting pole or winning the whole thing. So that would have been even crazier. But Max Verstappen in that Red Bull car is still pretty hard to beat. Even though, and we'll probably talk about this, but I don't think Max Verstappen had the best of races. Not like he was terrible. He still was obviously good enough to win, but I do think that the car really helped him out in this race particularly. McLaren got their first points of the season this year. It was chaotic. There was a lot of chaotic. There was 12 that actually finished the freaking race, which means if you finish the race, it was pretty hard. Yeah. So it was like it was, if you ended up finishing the race, more than likely if only 2 drivers were not going to get points. So it was a crazy race. And I think I'm going to start it off with this first. Like, first of all, what were your impressions? Like, 3 takeaways that you had in this race that kind of stuck out to you.
Okay, so chaotic is probably the most suitable word to use, because first lap, turn 3, you had Charles Leclerc, who basically spun out DNF right then and there off of the 3rd turn on the opening lap. So that was right there. Then you had Mercedes. They had George Lewis. He had an early lead coming out of the gates. He actually was really aggressive off the line when the race kicked off, which was great. So he held first for a little bit. And then obviously, as you know, I've forgotten what portion of the race, but he ended up having an engine fire and his day was over. I think one of the takeaways I would say is, Ferrari, I think, didn't have the greatest of showings. I mean, they had 1 driver that didn't finish. I know that you don't agree with the 5-second penalty that was on Sainz from the, I think it was the first red, from the first red flag reset, where he clipped Fernando Alonso and basically had to restart because they didn't have enough to go off of on positioning. So I think, Ferrari, in my opinion, it just, one takeaway is they had a terrible day. They could have walked away with some decent points, but they had neither driver finish in position to get anything. And, whatever position they could have gotten to maybe even compete with Aston Martin or Mercedes, they weren't able to get there. So that was a bad day for them. Second takeaway, I would think, is McLaren. They had 2 drivers, like what you mentioned, finish within the top 10. They had Norris finish at P6. Oscar Piastri finished P8, which is great, points in both of them. But also, too, will say that McLaren got really lucky because they had to have a driver cause a penalty in Sainz, and then also Alpine, which is my third takeaway, Alpine wrecking themselves off of the first red flag reset, which was peak Alpine. Like, when we thought that they were kind of turning around, and I gave them their flowers last week, totally just shat the bed, so to speak, in this race in Australia, and when they wrecked themselves. And really, they were all by themselves. And I forgot who it was that clipped one or the other, but regardless, they took themselves out. It wasn't other drivers that took them out. They took themselves out, and Alpine just did not have a great day. Raced decently, I'd say, all day, and maybe even had a chance to get into points, but because of their own stuff, they got in their own way. And did what Alpine does. So those are my 3 takeaways. Ferrari, not a great day. McLaren, finally with some points. Alpine, terrible outing with the 2 drivers wrecking themselves. I would say an underlying storyline, though, is Mercedes having Lewis Hamilton, like you mentioned, finish at P2 on the podium, which is great momentum. I think hopefully with this long break between the next race, they kind of get some things figured out. And then in summer break, hopefully they come back with a car that can maybe keep up with Red Bull, because this could be a momentum swing, even though Verstappen finished. But Verstappen was the only one on Red Bull that finished in points in pole. And as we know, Sergio Perez, Checo didn't get in the points position, so got real lucky on that. But this could maybe start some momentum for Mercedes, because George had a good day outside of the car going up in flames, and then Lewis had a really great day as well. So maybe this is a momentum swing for Mercedes.
Well, the 3 takeaways, and you and I think we'll have that discussion about the whole Carlos Sainz and all that. I'm sure, because I know you were kind of curious of why I was kind of against it, and I think it's more of the principle, because I told you, like, I kind of understand why they did it, but for me, it was more of the principle of the thing, and we'll get into it. But 3 things that I took away from this race. The first thing I wrote down: Mercedes is competitive. I mean, they were talking about how bad Mercedes looks, it's up to their standards, blah. But the fact of the matter is, if Russell doesn't have his engine, catch on fire, which kind of sounds like,
no kidding.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone didn't have their car catch on fire, if his car didn't catch on fire, that car was actually in line to possibly even beat Lewis Hamilton. Like, he was driving that well. It was just a real bummer to see him get out. But Lewis Hamilton then coming back, and like I said at the beginning of this, he actually has to beat Verstappen coming off, I believe, on the first restart. And because the other cars were crashing, they had to do another restart and realize what he first one and was able to correct it. But really impressive by Mercedes. And I got to be honest with you. Yes, ousting. I mean, absolutely ousting the competition. But the other thing is, I've noticed in the last 3 races now, which we've only had 3 races now, Aston Martin, and it always seems to come down to them. Ferrari is kind of in the mix here and there, but they are not getting their issues figured out. And so now we're seeing Mercedes actually being competitive. So that's one thing that I did take away from this race. And from the Australian Grand Prix, it is going to be most of the races that are in this season are going to be close to kind of like a Australian Grand Prix, in the fact that it's not just a street race. It's going to be more of what you would expect a Grand Prix to be. The second thing I wrote down was Valtteri Bottas. I'm very worried about him. He might be washed. And I think it's way too early to say that. He was so good. He was so good with Mercedes. So good. He was the Checo Perez. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little less talented in my opinion, but he was so good. He was so talented. He did everything they wanted him to. There were always times where it kind of looked like maybe he would race and they would let Lewis Hamilton win instead. And it was kind of like, that was where the controversy came. Oh, they're just doing it for Hamilton. And, they would always say, oh, Hamilton's car is faster, yada, 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 whatever it may be. But I mean, in reality, that's kind of what it looks like. It kind of looks like, Hamilton, they were right. Hamilton was always the faster car, because the way Bottas has been driving the Alfa Romeo, I mean, he avoided all the crashes, great, but he ended up in the 11th. I mean, Zhou Guan Yu, he was just like some filler guy that they threw in until someone else came up, but he's been the best driver for Alfa Romeo the last 2 years now. So I'm very concerned about Valtteri Bottas. I want him on the grid because he's such an amazing character in Formula One, and I think he's very talented. Mm-hmm. I know that it's a crappy car, so it's kind of hard to say like if it is him or if it's the car. But from what I see with Zhou Guanyu versus Valtteri Bottas, it's almost night and day, and that's very concerning for me. And it kind of reminds me of, the whole Daniel Ricciardo, Lando Norris situation, where everyone was like, well, Lando Norris is there and Daniel Ricciardo is doing nothing. Now we kind of found out that it's probably McLaren car, big driver. So I'm kind of thinking that could be it. But, right now it's kind of hard to tell. So I'm a little concerned about him. And the last thing that I had, and again, this is kind of one of those races, it's kind of hard to gauge of where these drivers are because of all the crashes that happen. But I kind of think Haas has a chance. That's right. I said Haas. As in Gene Haas, as in the American car. Listen. A
chance for what?
To be competitive.
Okay.
I think they have a chance to competitively in every Grand Prix possibly be in the top 10. Now, I don't think they're going to be like top 3.
Yeah, that's fair.
Ever. But Nico Hülkenberg was actually driving really well, and his qualifiers have been spectacular. They have been spectacular. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He has been doing so good in qualifying. I know it's just qualifying. You have to do it in the race, but qualifying is partial. It's a third of the actual race. It is a third of what we expect is going to happen in the race, and he does well. Now, come race day, especially towards the end, it seems like he falls apart. Now, the car. Now, Kevin Magnussen, on the other hand, didn't have the best of days. He ended up not finishing and got 17th place, but he wasn't driving all that well either. But it is encouraging that Nico Hülkenberg seems to be in the top 10 in qualifying every single week, and he's in 7th again. It was kind of hard not to, but I am very impressed with the way that Haas has looked over the last 3 races, and I do expect them to actually, be able to do something. So I think they can consistently get points throughout the whole year. I think I made a bold prediction could fight for a 4th place spot, and I don't think it's that crazy still.
Yeah, I think like Haas could be a team that maybe finishes, ahead of Ferrari in terms of like points for a team. But, I think maybe that they're just missing like one special driver. Like Hülkenberg is good. I'm really not sold on Kevin Magnussen. I think he's like more just a driver just to fill the second seat. But like, for example, we talked, I think the last episode we had, we kind of mentioned that Charles Leclerc, there's a chance that he might leave Ferrari because he may not like the direction that they keep going into and underperforming. I mean, if Charles Leclerc gets into a team like Haas, that would be an interesting combination, and let's see how good Leclerc is, and let's see how far Haas has brought in their car to see if they can be competitive and maybe getting a top 4, like you mentioned, maybe even seeing if they can compete with like an Aston Martin type of team, considering like right now Aston Martin's probably like the 3rd best team right now on the grid. But I think that Haas has like a lot of potential, and it's not like they're a team that has mechanical issues. It's just like driving faux pas. Like last season they had Schumacher, who just didn't seem to do really well, and then they've just had some drivers that had a lot of promise and just couldn't deliver. And it just seems like if they can get a driver that is willing to stay for a few seasons, that actually has got some talent, they could be an interesting team, because they probably got a sound car, and this is a team figuratively speaking, that's working on a really tight budget, because they're not nearly as deep as like Mercedes or Red Bull, and the fact that they're putting out some subpar finishes. And I kind of agree with you, they could be like a top team in the midfield, but I think it also just depends on how these drivers do, because Hülkenberg, he's probably good enough to have several of those outings. I'm not sold though on Magnussen to have the same outings though. I see him finishing outside of points, having a DNF like he just had in the Austrian Grand Prix. So we'll see. I think that's very interesting, your take on it. I want to add a little bit to another driver though, Lance Stroll getting P4, and I've basically said that I'm not sure if I believe in Lance Stroll as a driver. And I think he's a driver because of his dad owning the team. I think this is kind of proving out of 2 out of 3 races he's finished in high standings to show that he belongs on the track, which I think is great. So
I don't know. I'm still not sold on Stroll. I think again, yes, he got 4th, which was impressive over Perez, but Perez, in my opinion, should have been 12th. There's not a lot of it factor behind him, to be frank. And the only reason he finishes 3 seconds behind Verstappen is because
that cluster, yeah,
the restart was 1 lap. The second restart was 1 lap. So, for me, it's I know I'm talking about Hülkenberg and Lewis Hamilton, but those drivers I was talking about were kind of already in the race as it was, and with Lance Stroll, he actually wasn't having the best of races. It just ended up being that. All these crashes ended up kind of avoided it, and rightfully so. And I think he's not. I don't want to come out here and say that he's absolute trash. I don't think so. I used to think so for sure, because I watched him when his dad first took over the team. But now that they've been Aston Martin, and especially this year, they have been competitive, and he has driven really well. But I do think he just makes some mental mistakes. He almost ended up wrecking Fernando Alonso. I think it was the Saudi Arabia race.
Oh, sure.
Where he almost wrecked his own teammate, and he was lucky that he didn't puncture the tire.
Yeah. And
so it's just he makes these mental mistakes that I'm not sold on him yet. Mm-hmm. I think he's a very talented driver, like I said. I think he should still continue to be having his chance. Of course, I don't see his dad firing him. But at the same time, I'd like to see how he does the rest of or at least the next 3 races after this, mm-hmm. kind of to see, all right, is he going to be consistently around here, or is he just kind of benefiting from a lot of crashes? So
yeah,
that's what I want to see.
Fair.
I have a question for you, actually, Cody.
Okay.
My question being, McLaren gets points. So I think we can agree that no matter what, mm-hmm. no matter how they got it, Lando Norris was actually having a really good race. So there is a argument to be made that he was going to get points regardless. Mm-hmm. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, I don't think he was going to end up getting the points, but I do feel like, after the first on the first restart, I do feel like he was driving well enough to get to points, but then obviously they had another wreck, so it was kind of hard to tell. But do you think this is a spark for McLaren, or do you think this is just kind of luck of the draw?
This is luck of the draw. I mean, we got to remember too, not only did we have Carlos Sainz that had the penalty, regardless if you agree with it or not, you also had Alpine that had 2 cars crash. That's 3 potential drivers that normally finish within points or somewhere within 6 to 10. And I would make the argument that, yeah, Lando Norris probably would have finished in position to get points, maybe P10, P9. But I don't think Oscar Piastri would have finished within points. I don't think that they have a great car. I think their drivers are pushing these cars as far as they can go, and it's just not good enough. I mean, objectively, McLaren is probably the worst car out there, and it's just the fact that it took 2 red flags, 2 crashes, 2 restarts just to get them into points. And it wasn't even like they had to finish the final 2 laps to even get to those positions. They were kind of already set in those positions, and they just had the safety car take them to the line, and then that's where they finished. So I don't think that this is a spark for McLaren. I think it's a good pat on the back to show hey, we got points. But I wouldn't be surprised if they get maybe one more race where they get points by sheer luck. But I think this is the only shining moment where they might have 2 drivers finish in the top 10. I don't see it being a regular thing. I more or less will see. I wouldn't be surprised if they had only 1 car finish races more so than not. That's where I'm at with McLaren, because I don't really believe in this team. I mean, unless they change out the engineering team, which clearly can't make a good car. I not really trust the principal. He's not really doing it for me. He's not putting his foot down and making this team respectable. McLaren right now is just kind of a laughingstock, unfortunately, and not because they deserve to be. It's the fact that where they have fallen off, that's what I think is disappointing, is there's not even a light of improvement. It's continuous progression to be worse, in my opinion. So, I mean, good for them, good for Norris and Piastri for getting confidence. I don't see it happening very much again. And to think too, again, we have you have Haas, you have Alpine, I know that you and I were texting about Alfa Romeo, being another team that's competitive. I don't think that they can compete with, I don't think McLaren can compete with those teams, just those three. We're not even talking about, Alfa Tahari, excuse me. We're not even talking about that team. I just don't see McLaren being that competitive.
Alfa Romeo.
Whatever. I don't see him. Too many alphas around here. I just don't see them being that competitive the rest of the year.
Yeah, there's not much I can add to that because you absolutely ripped McLaren a new one. We'll just go with that. I mean, there's not much else I could say. I mean, I agree. Yeah. I right now McLaren to me is non-trustworthy, and good for them to stay out of all the bumps and crashes and all that. Great. I mean, that was great. And Lando looked like he was going to get points, but I don't think you're going to see Lando in that position all that much. And he had a good weekend, that whole weekend. He was really fighting for a top 10 spot in the qualifier. Ended up not getting it, but still, I mean, he was at least there. So, I agree with you. So let's go real quick on the signs. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you real quick about Daniel Ricciardo, because Christian Horner basically came out and said that Daniel Ricciardo is about 10 minutes away from being ready. Do you think maybe he'll be back driving for Red Bull next year and they'll, get rid of Checo?
I mean, if Checo had a really bad rate, which he actually was not driving really well in the Australian Grand Prix, then I would think maybe there's a possibility, because there's been a couple of times
he was last and he got fifth. How's that not good driving?
Well, he shouldn't have gotten fifth, is what I'm saying. He should have been in 12th. If it wasn't for the penalty on Sainz, he would have gotten 12th place.
Oh.
But for some reason, I forgot why he ended up moving up. I forget the whole reason, but he should have been like almost last in the finishing, because it wasn't like, yes, he was moving up in the driving, but he really wasn't doing it himself. It was kind of more when people were pitting, and he was just he just wasn't driving great. And then like he was ending up like almost fishing that tail end of the car a lot of times. He just wasn't himself. But I think he's fine. I think they need to keep Checo. I don't understand the talk of getting rid of Checo, but for some reason they are just like really on him about like everything. And I don't see how they think. I think maybe they're just trying to light a fire under his rear, because I just feel like they're not, Daniel Ricciardo would be much different. I think Verstappen, it's hard to drive side by side with Verstappen right now. So I think if Ricciardo is going to be on the grid, it's going to be with another team. I mean, shoot, he should go with Haas so he can, be the American icon that he wants to be, because he already lives in LA as it is. Yeah. And Haas is actually starting to move up a little bit. He can be the number one guy, and he doesn't have as much pressure as he wants to. I don't know if he would do that, but I think it would be a risk willing to take by both guys, because Ricciardo could continue to have that Americanized, because America loves Daniel Ricciardo. Yeah. I mean, he's like super popular here.
Hands down.
Obviously because of Drive to Survive, but still. But then also I think Haas you could promote the crap out of him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a lot more promotable and easier to promote than Nico Hulkenberg, who's not really a big talker, and Kevin Magnussen, who's a little more like, I'm going to stand on the side. I don't really want to talk to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, right now he's got a new family as well. So he's kind of focusing on that as well. So I think it would be a win-win for Haas. But, you know, I don't know anything about that. I haven't heard anything about that. But if Magnussen continues to drive how he drove in the Australian Grand Prix, I would be really curious to see if Ricciardo ends up being a Haas driver, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, fair.
All right, Cody. So I wanted to talk to you about Carlos Sainz.
Mm-hmm.
The whole penalty he gets penalized. You know, what was it? 5-second penalty. So it ended up making him go to 12th. And you could hear him on his radio call. He was so, and they're actually fighting it right now. And here is why I actually disagreed with the results. Understand what that was a penalty. Not arguing that it's not a penalty. Not arguing that. Then they go and say that the lap didn't count. That lap does not count. Now, I understand what he did was wrong, but at the same they are saying that the lap didn't count. And then the other thing that I had an issue with is Gasly saying that because Sainz had multiple offenses, that this is why they ended up doing the 5-second. So my issue is Pierre Gasly wrecked his own teammate.
Yeah.
Esteban Ocon. Okay, Alpine, that's who started it, was Gasly. He ended up putting both of them into the wall. And he's had multiple offenses as well. And the rule states that if you have these offenses, you have to be penalized, whether it be that race or the next race. So my issue is, now how come Pierre Gasly is not being penalized for what he did? Oh, it's just kind of, well, that's team-on-team crime, but it's a penalty. So my issue was they're not consistent with it. If you're going to make it a penalty, then I understand that. Then it needs to be a penalty for everyone. And what Gasly did was way worse than what Carlos Sainz was. Yeah, so that was my issue. Sure. I understand it being called a penalty. I understand that they say, hey, this is wrong. You got a 5-second penalty. But I also completely agree with Ferrari fighting it, and I hope they win, because the rules so far this year have been so inconsistent, and for the FIA, it's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. And it's like that they want to punish Ferrari for not being good. So they're just like, well, then screw it. Let's just make them really not good.
Sure.
And it was just, it was, to me, it was mind boggling.
I got you. So regarding the Alpine cars wrecking themselves, I think the reason why Gasly didn't get a penalty is he took his own teammate out. He didn't finish the race. His teammate didn't finish the race. It'd be one thing if, let's say, Gasly took out Norris. Then I would say, yeah, he deserves like a 5, maybe a 10-second, because on a restart, you had to restart the restart because they didn't go through enough sectors to basically get position to figure out where everyone is at. So what do? You just restart the thing. But because Alpine took themselves out, now you restart without those two because obviously they can't race. So I would agree if like Gasly should be penalized had he took out a different team, but he took out his own teammate. I mean, I don't know how you penalize that. Maybe they'll come out with something later after they finish with the whole Carlos Sainz ruling. I agree. The penalties have been very inconsistent. I do think, though, that there is something that anytime there's any sort of controversy or penalty or something that's going around Fernando Alonso, it's more citing to benefit Fernando Alonso, because the last race where he was supposed to serve a penalty and his crew member touched his vehicle, so then he lost out and ended up with P4 even though he got podium. and then they changed it later on, and then they again changed it to where he went back to P3. That all benefited Fernando Alonso. This one benefits Fernando Alonso because Carlos Sainz, I don't think he intentionally bumped into Carlos. I don't think Carlos Sainz intentionally bumped into Alonso, but I mean, I would also make the argument too that Carlos Sainz, he should have he had enough space to allow Fernando Alonso to take safely to where he didn't bump him, because it looked like he did just kind of keep going, and if he hit him, he hit him, and it's incidental contact is what he was trying to make the argument for. And I would just say, like, he had more than enough room to safely allow him in, which is why I'm more okay with the penalty. Now, regardless, if you want to say because this person didn't get penalized, I don't really, it doesn't really bother me. But I will say that the 5 seconds benefits Fernando Alonso, because Fernando Alonso almost couldn't finish the race because of that. And again, the ruling goes to punish Carlos Sainz, and Fernando Alonso gets right back to where he goes, and then he podiums. So maybe I'm going to be a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I think some of the penalties are in a way benefiting Fernando Alonso or Aston Martin to make the story of their team competitive. Maybe it is punishing Ferrari a little bit more just because they would known to be so dominant. Now they're not being dominant, and they're hitting him with every little ticky-tack things. But I would also say, too, the inconsistencies kind of surround the Aston Martin team a little bit, particularly Alonso. But all I'm saying is just on the first sector where they were going off of the first restart, I can see, okay, Carlos Sainz bumped a driver, spun him out, penalty. That's usually the what it calls for. But I can understand, too, because not everyone can get past a sector to get proper position, we got to restart. And that's where we're at with everything, regardless of, oh, well, why did everyone restart where they were? So the lap doesn't count. And yet the safety car takes everyone to the finish line, because essentially you have to let a safety car complete the lap, and then you have to end the lap without the safety car. So we can just honestly say the last 5 laps were controversial. Totally fine.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not so against the whole Carlos Sainz penalty just because of what I think Carlos Sainz could have done to not hit Fernando Alonso. And I'm not including the tit for tat of what the other penalties could have been for other drivers in other instances. So that's what my position is. I'm not trying to say that, Carlos Sainz should be absolved of it because Pierre Gasly didn't get a penalty. I'm just saying, from what it looked like on that first sector's turn, Carlos Sainz bumping into Fernando Alonso, and he could have probably helped avoid that to not cause that collision, is what I'm saying.
And my issue is with exactly what you're saying. It looked like he could end up possibly taking him out, which if he did, if Alonso is out of the race, 100% understand the 5 second call. I understand that. My issue is Alonso ends up finishing the race. Their issue is then they give him a 5 second penalty as well. And you're saying that the lap didn't count. So they should all start where they originally were, where Alonso would have been in front of Sainz, which is what you would do there if you pass someone by illegally, going over the white line, or by not giving someone enough space to make a move. What they do is they say, hey, you have to give the spot back. Why is it a 5 second penalty? It makes 0 sense. And that's my issue with it, is Alonso finishes the race. He's on podium. Sainz ends up getting 0 points for a minor incident, where Gasly ends up having a huge collision, and FIA is like, oh, no, it's okay, because it doesn't matter if they're teammates. Rules are rules. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like we're talking about Rudy Gobert punching his own teammate. Well, he's suspended for 1 game. I mean, if the team said, oh, we're not going to do anything about it, I'm sure the NBA would have been like, yeah, we'll step in and do something about it, because it's a bad look on the whole organization as a whole, the whole NBA. Whereas same thing here, it looks bad for the F1, for Formula One. That's with it. I didn't do right. I think Sainz has a legitimate argument of saying, listen, I bumped into him. No question about it. Can't argue it. But what I am arguing is that I should not be 12th place. I should not have a 5-second penalty, and I really do hope he ends up getting it. But I do understand coming from the other side. Just looking at it, I agree with you. He had room. He could, could have gave him room, but unfortunately he didn't. And this is what happens. But I also do think this hinted of what the action was. That's just kind of my argument. So I was saying, but Ferrari's not my team, so I don't care. So speaking of NBA, let's talk about the playoffs, Cody. We've had, we were going to talk about kind of like, all right, who's going to get into the playoffs? And now we've already had the 4 games of the play-in, and there's another game to be played in. Yeah, I said that right. Sorry, I had to make sure that I said that right.
2 more, I think.
Yeah, so there's 2 more. Sorry, is what I meant. I meant like another day. Crazy stuff. But let's talk about our team that we follow very closely, the Lakers. The Lakers make the play-in. I mean, all over Twitter, my whole Twitter is the Lakers had 0.3% chance of making the playoffs. They were 2-10. They were 15th in the West, and now all of a sudden they're in the play-in and they're in the 7th seed. It's incredible. And it's like, okay, yes, we got it, but it was literally 12 games in. Like, let's settle down a little bit. But I do love the excitement of Laker fans. Hard for me to really criticize it. It was 12 games. I mean, I would understand if it was like 30 games in and it was like, then yes, let's talk about that. But we're focusing on the wrong things. Listen, ever since this trade deadline, the Lakers have done well. And it's funny that even though the trades that we made, they literally were not on the court towards the end of the game, which was funny. But, listen, Jared Vanderbilt has been spectacular. He was not good in the play-in game. And I actually respect Coach Darvin Ham for saying, listen, he's not getting it done. We got to bench him. I can't tell you, especially, I'm not trying to put myself in an NBA coach. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. But as a guy who just started like coaching basketball, that is hard to do when you put someone in for a specific reason and they're not doing it. It's hard to pull them out because you know what they're capable of doing, but they're just not getting it done. And you always have that thought of, they're going to get back on track. They just need that one rebound, or they just need that 1 point, or they just need that one assist or that one steal, whatever it is. And it's so hard to do that. And I give them so much credit for saying, listen, Vanderbilt's not getting it done. D'Angelo Russell was having a hard game. Beasley was non-effective. We got to go with our other guys. And they did well. I mean, kudos to Darvin Ham. I thought that was a hard decision to make, especially in a big game like that. And he did well. So kudos to him. But now the Lakers are in the 7th seed, and they have to face the Memphis Grizzlies. So, Cody, if you talk about the play-in game, feel free. I'm not limiting you. But I also am curious of how you think this series between the Memphis Grizzlies and the Los Angeles Lakers is going to play out.
So before I talk about the Grizzlies series, I will say, the Lakers did play hard. I actually watched it. I felt like the Lakers, though, should have been a little bit more attention to detail. I know that Minnesota is one of those teams that likes to, go into the paint, like to swipe at the ball. I felt like the Lakers could have been a little bit more prepared for that. And I agree with you, man. Shout out to Darvin Ham for making the tough decisions. I mean, D'Angelo Russell arguably is like probably the 3rd best player on the team that we're going to have to rely on when it comes to distributing and shooting the ball. And Darvin Ham took him off the court when it mattered the most, put in Dennis Schroeder, who did really, really well for us offensively and had a pretty good amount of defensive stops and was a really good defensive presence as well. LeBron James and Anthony Davis did what they had to do. I felt like our 3-point shooting lacked a lot in the play-in, but I'd like to think that was just because of the energy expended playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, which kind of concerned me because they didn't have Rudy Gobert, nor did they had, I think his name is Jaden McDaniels, who broke his wrist punching a wall, I think, or his hand, I think, punching a wall. But regardless, the Lakers got it done, which was great. It was in overtime, dramatic fashion. I mean, leave it to LeBron to do the dramatics, but it's very exciting that we're in the playoffs, 7th seed at that. And again, I know what you're talking about, the whole 2-10 when it was 12 games into the season. I think that's really nice corkboard material, but let's be honest, like they've been teetering at 13 and 12 for like 3 months, and the trade deadline happened and they finally got over it. It helped. They had some good shooting. Looking ahead now to the Memphis game, the Memphis series with the Lakers. I think the Lakers are probably going to get bounced in the first round. I think that Memphis is a lot younger than them, which I think is a huge thing. I think their defense is going to wear out the Lakers. I know that LeBron James is going to probably have a very good series. Anthony Davis, I wonder how he's going to do against Jaren Jackson Jr., who is very good on the defensive side and also offensively. So I'm really curious to see that matchup between the bigs. If our 3-point shooting comes alive with Beasley, Russell, and I would even say Hachimura, if he can shoot the ball really well, I think it'll be good. But I'm concerned though, because Grizzlies, they get out and they run a lot, and I just don't know how much running the Lakers can do for a long period of the series. I mean, I think maybe the Lakers can get 1, maybe 2 games if they really stretch it out, but it also just depends too about Memphis. One of the things that I'm concerned about with Memphis, which is why I don't think they'll go much further than the second round if they do get past the Lakers, is they seem too arrogant for their own good, and they don't seem to respect the competition that they're going against. And like, for example, Dylan Brooks having this back and forth with all the Warriors about how Grizzlies are a dynasty, and it's great confidence, but it's also a little arrogant to assume that you're on that level yet. And I don't think that they're a championship team, even with John Morant and all the other players. So I think the Lakers can probably stretch this to 6, but I don't think they'll get past the Grizzlies. But if the Grizzlies play immature and they don't respect the Lakers in terms of like what the Lakers are really good at, and not respecting the Lakers shooting, which I think the Lakers could have some nights where they shoot the ball really well. Like Beasley has had multiple nights of 30-point outings, very efficient shooting, and same thing with Russell. So we can get hot real quick if Memphis doesn't respect our shooting or pay us the respect to play good defense on us. But I also think too, though, the Lakers with their age, getting out and running, trying to keep up with the fast breaks might do us in. But I don't think the Lakers are going on to the second round. If they do, it'll be miraculous. But like, I'm hearing some people saying that the Lakers could make it to the finals. I don't see that happening. But as a Lakers fan, I'd love to see it. But realistically, we probably needed a full season with the group that we had to maybe make that argument. But I would even say we're still working out the kinks of rotations and getting familiar with one another, that we're just not there yet. If we can keep this group together for a full offseason and a full year leading into it, I'd say, yeah, we're a really good team, but we're still just too green as a team, in my opinion, to make any noise in the playoffs.
I am going to somewhat disagree. First of all, I am with you on the fact of, you were saying that Memphis likes to run a lot. That is a big concern that I have going into the series. Is the Lakers looked exhausted with the one game that they played against Minnesota. So the issue is, can these old guys get it done? I do think we match up really well with Memphis. And listen, D'Angelo Russell, Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley didn't have the best of games in the play-in. No question about it. Not going to argue that. But I don't think that's going to consistently be the case. I think D'Angelo Russell is a guy who can hit a lot of shots. Beasley is a guy who can hit threes at any point in time, and he's a 3-and-D guy, which is exactly what we need. And Jared Vanderbilt, I mean, he couldn't even grab a rebound, it seemed like, in that game. But whereas going against the Grizzlies versus the Timberwolves, the Grizzlies don't have as much size as the Timberwolves did or do. So, and that was even without Rudy Gobert. So I do think that this is a better matchup for the Lakers. Ja is going to do Ja things. I'm not even going to be like, oh, we're going to. But I do feel like we have defenders like a Beasley or even Austin Reeves at times. I think can put some pressure on Ja and somewhat in check. I mean, check being scoring under 25 points. But I do feel like, Jaren Jackson, when we've faced him all this whole season, Jaren Jackson cannot figure out Anthony Davis. I know you're talking about he's a very skilled player, and he absolutely is. But when they have faced the Lakers, Anthony Davis has eaten Jaren Jackson up every single time they have played. Jaren Jackson cannot figure him out. Their one ace in the hole that they do have that I think is a very underrated ace is actually Steven Adams. I think Steven Adams can put size in front of Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is going to have to settle for a few shots when you have Adams on. Now, I know Adams doesn't start, so you're going to have to figure out when you put him in. But what that does is Anthony Davis has to settle for shots, and his shots have not been great this year. And I think if you're the Grizzlies, I'm sure they know this, but you're going to have to really have Anthony Davis settle, because if he dominates, he gets like that spark in where he's going to continue to play like this, and he thinks he's invincible, and you don't want him to believe that, because that's when he will eat you alive. So with the Grizzlies, I think they would be smart to take Anthony Davis out by having him settle for shots. You're going to have to settle for him hitting an occasional three, an occasional jumper there, but he may not end up with like 32 points. He may end up with only 22 points, and that's a big difference. And then James, I was hearing, I think it was the Bill Simmons podcast where they were talking about, it might have been Colin Cowherd, I'm not entirely sure, but they were talking about, well, LeBron, he wasn't able to get by Anthony Davis. I don't think that, or I'm sorry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards. And I don't think that was really the case. I think it was more LeBron was trying to pass the ball, look for the pass. I don't think he was trying to blow by every single time. So I don't know. I don't really agree with that statement. But they were talking about, well, Dylan Brooks, he's an aggressive defender and blah, blah, blah. Well, LeBron is a smart player. So he's going to get Dylan Brooks in foul trouble if Dylan Brooks is going to let him get in his head. And so I really think that this is a really good matchup for the Lakers. I do think they can win. I probably say Lakers in 6. I don't think it's going to be, a 5-game series or a sweep. I think that's naive, but I do feel like the Lakers, I do feel like the Lakers will do fine. I do worry about the running, and of course that is going to be a big factor. But I don't think that, honestly, the Grizzlies have the shooters that the Lakers do, which is kind of funny to say, because it seems like every game that we talk about the Lakers, they never have any shooting. But ever since this trade, Beasley, Reeves has been really impressive. Russell is a really good shooter. Anthony Davis and LeBron James. I mean, those are really good shooters right off the gate. And they have some other guys coming off the bench like a Troy Brown, who's been actually pretty playable. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a definitely interesting series. I think there'll be some games where Lakers just look completely outmatched, but I think vice versa, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, fair.
All right, Cody. Let's talk about who you have making the finals. I know we haven't finished the last 2 play-in games, but I think it's safe to say any of those play-in games or play-in teams we don't really see going very far, unless you do. And correct me if I'm wrong. For sure, I don't.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of who you have going into the NBA Finals.
So I'll start with the East. I feel like that one is probably going to be a little bit easier to predict who's going to come out of the East. Man, I really want to choose Boston because I really love Jason Tatum. I love Jaylen Brown. I feel like that they have a really good team. There's just a lot of ifs that their team needs to stay healthy. At some points that it seems like they've taken a step back defensively, and then there's other nights they're locked down. And I feel like the Bucks, they just seem to elevate when they get into the postseason. And I feel like with Giannis, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, he's not injured now going into the playoffs. I feel like that's huge. Brook Lopez coming off, the bench to give that stretch 5 still some shooting, or Bobby Portis Jr. especially. They've got a lot of bigs that can stretch the floor and get in the middle. I really like Milwaukee to bounce back and get back into the finals. So I'm going to say I have the Bucks representing the East. The West is a little bit harder just because there's a lot more parity in there. Like, you can make a case for Denver. You can make a case for the Phoenix Suns. You can't count out the Warriors, unfortunately, just because they have the Splash Brothers. They're defending champions. They just got word back that they can get Andrew Wiggins, who has been out for I think a couple of months now because of personal issues. So now he's coming back. He's a defender and another scorer that they've desperately needed, but can they catch lightning in a bottle, so to speak, and make it back to the finals? I feel like that they're terrible on the road, so I don't know if they can do that. The Clippers, I feel like, are like a dark horse team, but without Paul George, I don't know if they can really elevate themselves to get into the finals. So for me in the West, I'm going to say that the Phoenix Suns are poised, in my opinion, to get back into the finals. I think that Kevin Durant, Devin Booker will be bucket getters. I feel like DeAndre Ayton will be that anchor in the middle who will be just a double type of player, especially how young and energetic he is. A lot of concern though with the Suns is they don't have a lot of depth, and they're missing Mikal Bridges, who was basically a defensive player of the year for them. But I do feel like the team defense that they can play with Kevin Durant, Ayton, and a handful of other players, I think they can make it work, because I feel like that their scoring will go up to where they can now run people out of the gym rather than lock defenders down, which when you get into the postseason, the games slow down and it's all about mid-range. And I feel like the Suns have the best mid-range players that are still in the playoffs right now. And I feel like Devin Booker needs a player like Kevin Durant and his level of scoring to take the relief off of him, so he can have nights where he goes off. Same thing with Kevin Durant, and having Chris Paul be that leader that could be that floor general to distribute the ball. So I really like the Phoenix Suns to come out of the West. I think it's going to be a tough series that they're going to go against with the Clippers, though. I feel like that'll really test to see how good the Suns team is. But I do feel like that the Suns are probably going to come out of the West here. I'm not a huge... it's not that I'm not a fan of Denver. I'm just not buying that they're ready yet. I feel like there's too many question marks. They really had some, the last 10 games that they played in the season were very 50-50 ball, and I'm just not sure if they're ready yet to be in the championship series. So I'm going to go with Phoenix, and I'm going to go with Milwaukee as a finals rematch from, I want to say 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Sorry, I was really focused on what I was doing. I don't even remember. It's all a blur. Like, all the finals are always a blur now. Like, I feel like I just saw that it was what was it, six years ago where the Kobe, or 5 years ago that Kobe played his last game as a Laker, the 60-point game, and I was just like, dude, I just feel that was last year. Like, it's crazy to me. First of all, that he's gone, and then secondly, I remember coming to my in-laws' house, and my wife was upstairs watching the game, and I was like, why the heck are you watching the game? She's like, it's Kobe's last game. was like, yeah, you hate basketball. You're not even into basketball. And she was like, well, it's Kobe's last game. Point taken. I'll watch it. And it was spectacular.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't really have any issues. Game. Yeah. I don't have any issues with what you said. I'm really just going to stick with kind of what I had predicted before. And I think it's just me being stubborn, but I just feel like might as well stick with it. What can I lose now? I'm not really in love with anyone in the West. Like, I'm not like, oh, this team is for sure. Like, I feel like the Warriors could do something, but I also could see, like, they've been terrible on the road. Like, if you're terrible on the road and you're not a seed, it's pretty tough to win to win a series when you're not going to be, you're not going to have the home field advantage. Like, it's not going to happen for you. So, I worry about them. At one point I look at the Suns and I'm like, oh man, how did the Suns lose? But then I'm like, they have zero defense. Like, it's almost laughable. It's almost like the Dallas Mavericks defense. Like, it's really not good. And like Chris Paul in his heyday was great. Now he's just he's okay. DeAndre Ayton, he's just so 50-50. And then, of course, KD. I mean, he's actually gotten better as he's gotten older on defense. So he's the only one I'm not worried about. But really, health-wise, is where I would be worried about with KD. But for me, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think there's anything to say here. I'm with you. I really like this. I really do. But they're so instant. Just feel like this right now is playing unbelievable. I saw that you had and if we were going to record this week, if it wasn't Jokic or Embiid, who would your MVP be? I think it would be Giannis. I mean, to be perfectly honest, Giannis has had that great of a year. Yeah. It's just, it's kind of flying under the radar because they had sealed the number one seed for a while, or at least sealed a playoff spot where no one's really talking about them because they're trying to rest guys or whatnot. And so, I just feel like Milwaukee Bucks right now, they're such a well-oiled machine. It's tough to stop them. Yeah. I don't see really anyone else in the East beating them. I think the Bulls could possibly, if they can make the play-in, I think they could put up a really good fight. But Zach LaVine, he's got to be on his game. Vucevic, or however you say his name, he's got to be on his game. He's got to be shooting well. And then DeMar DeRozan has got to be he's got to be doing DeRozan things, and which he has been all year. So I'm not worried about that. But I just feel like Giannis is just so unbeatable right now. He's just so. Embiid can't slow him down, in my opinion. I don't even think Jokic could stop him, and I'm not really worried about the Bucks, to be perfectly honest. And then the other team, the West team, like I said, I'm not in love with any West team. I'm going to stick with the Nuggets, though. I think Jokic has played unbelievable this year. Even without these great talented players that they have. Michael Porter Jr., I think, is a scary player, but he's too inconsistent. And if he could be more consistent, he'd be good. Jamal Murray, he hasn't been very good this year. And I say that kind of lightly. I mean, he's better than most players, but he's not been 2020 Jamal Murray, where he was in the bubble just absolutely just wrecking everyone, which was crazy. But I'm just not in love with the West teams, and it's hard for me to say. And I just think, listen, the Nuggets have the ability to score with anyone, and they also have a really good D. Jokic is just, I mean, no one can stop him, I think, other than maybe Giannis could put up a good fight in Embiid, but they're both on the East. So to get into the finals, you have to go through the West, which I'm not really sold on any of the other centers. So I think Jokic will bring his team into the finals.
what team do you think will not make the finals, but is going to be a team that nobody wants to face, or is going to be really hard to take out? Like, you're going to have to go 7 games. What team do you think in the playoffs that we're not talking about, or we are talking about, that, you know, obviously won't make the finals, but be a year or 2 away?
Wow. So, okay. So in the West, I think a team that'll be hard to eliminate, for sure, the Golden State Warriors, defending champions. They got a lot of heart in them. I know the popular answer is probably the Sacramento Kings, but I feel like, you know, they just arrived, and, you know, I feel like experience is important in the playoffs, and the Golden State Warriors have a ton of that. And I feel like the Golden State Warriors are probably going to be the toughest team to eliminate, just because where they're at, they're getting healthy at right around the correct time they need to be. Steph Curry shooting really well. Klay Thompson's had arguably a comeback player of the year type of year. You know, again, Andrew Wiggins is coming back. They have Gary Payton II, who was their defensive anchor last season, who's now back on the team. They don't have a whole lot of depth, though, but I think that some of their role players, like Jonathan Kuminga, could be a really good contributor. You know, obviously they still have Draymond Green, who is basically their primary ball handler and facilitator. If he can keep his head on straight, you know, he would also be someone that can help him on the team. I think the Warriors in the West are going to be the team that is the toughest to face. A team, though, that I feel like, to answer the second part of the question, is maybe a year away. In the East, I would probably say the Cleveland Cavaliers are a very good team that, you know, I think with the addition of Donovan Mitchell, they are a phenomenal offensive team. They have hit a lot of highs this season. I think there's an argument to be made that maybe Donovan Mitchell should be in the conversation for MVP, just because of when he came on the team, how he's elevated his play. The wins have elevated since he's also been there as well. I mean, I wouldn't say I would give him the award over Giannis. Giannis clearly is the most valuable on his team, but I would say Donovan Mitchell deserves some respect to at least be mentioned in the conversation as like maybe a nominee of it, so to speak. But I think the Cavaliers next season, I think, with a couple of maybe pieces, or now that they're looking like a really attractive team, maybe they get a couple of solid role players, you know, maybe some defensive stars. I really feel like the Cavaliers could be a team that maybe we're talking about as contenders next year. I'm not sold on the 76ers. I still think they're more like a second round out kind of a team. But I think the Cavaliers are about a year away from probably being very, very good. And they're already very good now. I think that they can maybe take one more step in the offseason, maybe even in the draft, with what they do for their team. But I do think it all started when they acquired Donovan Mitchell, and they're going to be a tough team to get out in the East. I think they're going to be really scrappy, but I think they're just too soon.
I am mad that you brought up Donovan Mitchell, because I had the Cavaliers.
Okay.
I think this Cavalier team is really good.
Yeah.
Evan Mobley is so underrated. Like, he was talked about so much last year because he was a rookie, and now it's kind of like, all right, we're done with him, you know, whatever. But he's been spectacular. He's a guy who he can shoot from anywhere, and he's a really good defender. And I really, really like this Cavalier team. Donovan Mitchell, as you said, he's been in the playoffs, so he has that experience. Garland has been a really good shooter for the Cavs. So this is an impressive team. I'm with you. I just think they're just not there yet, you know, and I agree with the Warriors stand as well, you know. Listen, they're always a team you're going to be worried about, but I feel like that's kind of an obvious answer. And, you know, I almost kind of went with the Bulls because I really like the Bulls roster, but they just have not been playing very well with each other. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of hard for me to say, oh, it's the Bulls. I mean, when you look at the roster, yeah, of course. But when you look at the way they play, you're like, oh, this is not that scary of a team. Where as the Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell, he could score 40, or they could have him score 20, and they're still okay. I mean, literally Mitchell can do whatever, and it doesn't matter because they still play the same. So I really, really like this Cavalier team. Again, I agree with you. I don't think they're ready yet, but they're close. They are very, very close. Another year, maybe 2, and I think they're there. So this is a scary team. So kudos to you, Cleveland. You got LeBron James out of there, and you guys are still viable. So, hey, way to go.
Only took you 10 years, but hey.
All right, Cody. Well, I had made my MLB power rankings because you said, listen, you need to do it, blah, blah, blah. I need you to, I need you to keep doing it because I really enjoyed it, whatever. Listen, I don't appreciate the pressure that it puts on me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I really,
you liar. You like it.
Yeah, I really do like. I like doing this. I just feel like it's really for my own benefit. So I do feel like guilty when you ask me to do this stuff. But this was a hard one, man, because I literally did this 2 days ago. And from Tuesday to now, to literally after today's games, it is so different.
Oh, already?
It is so different. Yes, it is so different. There's actually a team that I had on that's not on anymore, and then I had a team that was not on there that is on there. Actually, I think there's 2 teams that I don't have on there now. And really, I just kind of went. This is kind of a gut feeling. And also kind of what I have seen. I've watched a lot of baseball. I don't want to say, no, I've watched a lot. I'll say I've watched a lot. I haven't watched like from inning 1 to 9, unless it was the Giants on any other team. But for the most part, I've watched baseball every day. To, my wife's, not happy. She's not happy with that, but it helps that my brother-in-law is kind of getting into the prize picks and stuff, which is kind of funny because I'm doing it with him a little bit here and there. I'm not doing it every day. He's like doing it like every day.
Dang.
And he got like everyone else into it, and it's just so funny. It's funny. Anyway. So he's like watching certain games at certain times because he's got, players doing this and players doing that. So it's fun. I kind of joke with him because he had one time, I know this is completely off topic, but there was one game where he had Luka and it was 47.5. So he needed Luka to score 48 points. And it was against a really bad defense. So he was like, oh, he's going to do it. Sure. He's going to do sure. And 35 through 3 quarters, he proceeded to not score a single point in the 4th quarter. And then at the very end, he heaves a full court shot, but the buzzer hit before he let go of it, but he drained it. And I can't tell you that I laughed so hard at my brother-in-law. He was so mad. He was like, that was 48 right there. It was so funny. I laughed so much at that, and I felt bad because I know he could have won a lot of money on that, but it was so funny. And so I did one on Tuesday where we had Garrett Cole, and they called it Taco Tuesday. So the initial line was 7.5 strikeouts. So he would have had, if you get over, it's 8. If you do the under, it's got to be 7 or else. But the Taco Tuesday brought it down 2. So he had to either get, it was 5.5. So you either had to get 6 strikeouts or go for the under, and obviously under 6 strikeouts. We went with the over, both him and I. We watched the game. The guy couldn't get a strike. Could not get a strikeout. It was ridiculous. He got 3 strikeouts in literally 7 innings. Garrett Cole, a guy who averages like 7 strikeouts a game. So we were so mad. We were so mad about that. And then everything else that we did hit that day. And so we were so angry.
It's the pitchers. It's the pitchers.
So I've been watching a lot of baseball. Is what I'm trying to say.
The pitcher's clock got him.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. His command was terrible, and it was just. And then he was getting quick outs, double plays, which baseball wise, yeah, that's great. But we needed strikeouts, and we thought Garrett Cole, he's a strikeout guy. But where we went wrong was he faced the Guardians, and the Guardians don't strike out a lot. So that was kind of our. That was the issue there. Anyway, needless to say, I watched a lot of baseball is what I'm trying to go for. I initially did not have 2 days ago. I had the Brewers at number 1 because they were 9-2, and they had faced better competition than what the Rays had faced.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, the Brewers have lost 2 games. They won today, though, so kudos to them. They beat the Padres, which I think is a good win. But they beat them in extras. And then the Rays have done nothing but consistently win.
Mm-hmm.
They're 13-0 right now. I don't like now the run differential is huge, but that's because they have not lost.
Sure.
So the run differential is a little skewed right now. But it's hard to deny the Tampa Bay Rays. And so to start the our power rankings, the first edition of the power rankings of this year, I have the Tampa Bay Rays at number 1. The Tampa Bay Rays are playing spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like I said, I'm not really fawning over who they're facing because it's not like these world beating type teams. But, again, you cannot deny that this team they're winning. And that's really what the end of the game is. The first series was against the Tigers. Swept them, obviously. Then they played the Nationals. Again, not world beaters. Then they played the Athletics. Listen, all 3 of those teams could potentially be last place in their divisions. So that's why it's hard for me to be like, oh, this Rays team is the best team out there. But they swept in a 4-game series the Boston Red Sox. And I don't think the Boston Red Sox are a bad team. I don't think they're great, but I do think that is a respectable team to sweep against. So I think that is huge and, a step in the right direction. Now they're going to play the Blue Jays tomorrow in a 3-game series, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that'll be interesting, and it is in Toronto. So that's another series that I think is respectable. I think they will lose at least 1 in that series. So I do think their reign is pretty much, or their unbeaten streak is going to be pretty much over in that. Now, if they come out unbeaten, now I have to acknowledge that this could potentially be better than the Moneyball A's where they won 20 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
They could do it if they beat it because the next few series that they have is not terrible as well. So my number 2 team, I have the Milwaukee Brewers. Now the reason I had them first is they played the Cubs, who I think is a decent team, and they beat them in a 3-game series. They won 2 out of 3. Then they swept the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
They won 10-0 or 10-0. Then the next game they won 9-0, and then the next game they won 7-6. So they skunked them in 2 games, and then they ended up winning a close game, which is very, very hard to do. Then they played St. Louis Cardinals, where they won 2 out of 3 there, and pretty handily as well. Then they actually lost the series to Arizona Diamondbacks, who I actually have on my top 5, and we'll talk about where they're at.
Wow.
But this Diamondbacks team is pretty scrappy. And then they just beat San Diego in extras. So, and it's a 4-game series with San Diego. So this is going to be a hard series because they were in Arizona. Now they're in San Diego. And then Monday through Wednesday, they're going to be in Seattle. So this is going to be a pretty brutal road trip for the Brewers. So we'll see how they handle it. But for the most, Milwaukee Brewers are legit. They are a scary team. They are able to hit, score runs, and their pitching is not bad at all. So I really, really like this. The next team that I have actually, and they weren't on here, the Minnesota Twins.
Oh, okay.
The Minnesota Twins have done really. Again, they were number one, but it was kind of the teams that they had played. They have faced the Royals, the Marlins, the Astros, the White Sox, the Yankees, which actually they just started the Yankees series. Now, the Royals, I'm not impressed with at all. They have some really talented players, but as a team, they're still kind of struggling, and they swept the Royals. So it's not like the Royals were doing much. They played the Marlins, where they actually ended up losing that series to the Marlins, and I don't think they should have. So that was kind of my concern at the start. And then the Astros, they did did win the series against the Astros. But again, the Astros are not healthy right now. They're without Brantley. They're without Altuve. They just, Pena was kind of struggling in the beginning. Tucker hasn't been hitting all that well. And Yordan Alvarez also hasn't been really crushing it. And their pitching has kind of struggled throughout the start of the season. So we'll have to watch that. Then they beat the White Sox. Again, I don't think the White Sox are at a top tier level, so it's an okay win. And then they just started the Yankees series today, where they actually ended up beating them 11-2. So we'll see how the rest of that series goes, but I think they have some respectful wins. I do think I'm a little concerned that they lost the Marlins, but it happens. And it seems like even though Correa has not been playing well, they don't need him. I mean, it seems like they're doing really well, and Sonny Gray has been pitching phenomenally for Minnesota Twins. I mean, talk about a name in the past.
Talk about a shocker,
and he's doing well. Yeah, so good for him. Now he has to stay healthy. That's the issue. So number 4 team, I have the New York Yankees. I walked series against the Giants that they had, and here's the deal. Their pitching was not healthy going against the Giants. Now, I'm not saying the Giants are this spectacular team, but I do feel like their pitching was not that great, and they were able to handle their own. And where their pitching was lacking, their hitting was so good. Anthony Rizzo looked really good. He was hitting the ball really hard. Giancarlo Stanton had a really bad series in that one. But Aaron Judge, the first at bat he has against the Giants, of course, he smacked an absolute bomb on them, which was just a dagger to the heart. It was just so sad to see. I'm glad we didn't. I mean, I'm kind of glad we didn't have to see Rodon, because I just don't think the Giants team is ready for that yet. Then they won the series against the Phillies, won 2 out of 3, which I think the Phillies are a good team. Right now they're struggling, but I do think they're going to kick back. Then they beat the Orioles it's supposed to be a 4-game series. 1 game got postponed, so they won that series 2 out of 3, which I think the Orioles are a really impressive team. This is not a team you want to play. Then they won the series against the Guardians, who, again, I really like the Guardians. They're not an easy team to beat. And then obviously they just lost to the Twins. So that's honestly why I put them just below the Twins, just because the Twins have a better record, and head-to-head right now, Twins are over the Yankees. So, but I really like this Yankees team, and they're only going to get healthier. They still don't have Carlos Rodon, who's supposed to be their number 2 or number 3 ace. So it'll be interesting to see how this team does. And I think their bullpen actually looks fairly well right now. That would be my concern that I have for them. But it's the New York Yankees. They're not going to have trouble finding trade suitors for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be so hard for them to find anyone who wants to trade with the New York. Hey, who wants to Yankees? No. Yeah, that's never going to happen. People are always going to want to go to the Yankees, just like people are always going to want to go to the Lakers. All right, finally, my number 5 team, Arizona Diamondbacks.
Wow.
Listen, I almost put the Dodgers ahead of them, but listen, they beat the Dodgers in a 4-game series, 3 out of 4. And I think this Dodger team is better than the Diamondbacks. And right now it's too early. But then they went ahead and beat a Brewers team in a 3-game series, 2 out of 3. And they're going to start their series against Marlins and Cardinals, which I think are very winnable series for the Diamondbacks. This is a very scrappy Diamondbacks team. Now, do I think this is going to continue? I don't think this is, but what I'm going off of is what have you done right now and what have I seen? And really what I've seen with the Diamondbacks is when they're down, they don't panic. They have guys like Corbin Carroll. That guy is so fast. It is ridiculous. Their pitching is not great. That's what I would be worried about. Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen has been okay, but Merrill Kelly has not been, since the World Baseball Classic, has not been what as advertised, I guess, would be the best way to describe that. So that would be my concern is their starting pitching, and Madison Bumgarner labors every single start so far. But their lineup is pretty scrappy. These guys, they don't strike out a ton. They don't panic. It's actually very impressive. And they kind of dominated a Dodger team. You know, they split their first series against the Dodgers, which was okay. That was fine. Then they split the Padres, but then they beat the Dodgers again, 3 out of 4. That is very impressive, and I'm very impressed with this team. Again, I don't see them continuing this trend, but right now they're the number 1 team in the NL West. The run differential is a -2, so I do think that is going to come into play. The Dodgers are +24, but again, the Dodgers really haven't played spectacular teams either. Like, yes, they faced the Diamondbacks, but they haven't really faced a really hard-nosed team yet. So, and I think, again, they're not as healthy as you'd want them to be, and they're not going to be all year because Kershaw looks like he's laboring big time. Yeah. I mean, the Giants lit him up. And then, Walker Buehler's out for the whole year. Dustin May didn't look great. So I'm a little concerned about him. And Julio Urias, he's fine. I don't think he's a guy who's going to be, a Cy Young winner again. But it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout the year for the Dodgers. But I don't think the Dodgers are as good as what they were last year. I think they were better last year. And I also think they're waiting for the Ohtani sweepstakes. So I think they're okay, not as good.
Yeah. Another pitcher from the Dodgers that's not panning out, Nolan Syndergaard, which is, I don't think it's surprising, but would have thought that he'd be performing a little bit better in this lineup.
He's been okay.
I mean, yeah, he's all right.
Yeah. He's been okay though. I don't want to dump on Noah Syndergaard because I think he has actually been more impressive than I thought. But I'm also, it's what he's pitched 2 games so far, so or 3 games maybe. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have one more topic, right?
We do, and it's about the San Francisco Giants. So I'll volley this over to you, sir. So we've gone. Giants are currently. I'll put out my notes real quick. Giants are currently sitting in second to last place, 5-7 in the NL West. They obviously just finished the series with the Dodgers, where they got a goose egg posted on them. I think it was 10. Was it 10-0 or was it 10-1? I think on earlier this week. Then they came back and shut out the Dodgers, and then they had a late inning blow job by Rogers in the 7th of the most recent game with the Dodgers, and that was a terrible loss. So, Drew, what's your thoughts on the Giants so far this year? And do you think that they could pull themselves together the rest of the season?
My issue right now with the Giants is the pitching. It's not as advertised. That's the second time I've said that, but it works. I had said at the beginning of the year, I think this Giants team, the way they're going to stay in games is their pitching, because Scott Alexander is actually a really talented pitcher. He's smart. Doesn't have lights out stuff, but he's a guy that you can use, every day or whatever, and he's really good. John Brebbia, same guy. I mean, he's very solid. He's not going to blow by you with, he's got a good fastball, but I mean, nothing spectacular. Camilo Doval, who's supposed to be our closer, he can't find the strike zone. It seems like he's walking guys. And there was a point, I forget if I think it was against the Dodgers. No, you know what? It was against, I forget which series it was. But I mean, it was like bases loaded and there was 2 outs and it was like a 3-1 count, and he threw a complete ball, and he's lucky that the guy went after it and ended up having the guy like ground out or something. But the guy swung at an obvious ball 4, and it was just like I was sitting here with my in-laws, and we were just like, I mean, my in-laws were like, he swung a ball 4.
Was that the Royals series?
I think it was the Royals. Yeah. I think it was. Yeah, and it was just he doesn't look right. Jacob Junis, he looks fine. They're using him a lot though, and you don't want to have to use him all the time. Taylor Rogers, he was our big acquisition that we got for the pitching staff, and he could not find the strike zone yesterday. And when he did, I mean, Freeman was just all over it. He is not right. I think he's going to go on the IL, to be perfectly honest. Tyler Rogers has been the one bright side of our bullpen so far. Tyler has been really good. We expected him to be good, but after you've seen a submariner or you face him enough times, you kind of start to figure him out, and he doesn't throw hard. So that's always a concern, but he's been pitching really well. He's pitching smart. He's been good. Ross Stripling, he has been very disappointing so far. I thought he was going to be a lot better. I was really liking him coming from Toronto. He hasn't been great. But he is coming out of the bullpen. So maybe that's an issue. Maybe he needs to be in the rotation. I don't know. But all I can say is what I'm seeing so far, it's not been great. Alex Cobb, Anthony DeSclafani. DeSclafani has been okay. Cobb has not been great. Sean Manaea, his last start was really good. Really good. And it sucked that he ended up getting a no decision because he was winning when he came out of the game, and then all of a sudden we lost. And it was like, dude, that guy deserved way more than that crap.
Yep.
Logan Webb, he's been not good. He's given up too many long balls. And I had said it in the beginning when we faced the Yankees, the game 1. My issue was he's a low ball pitcher, and a lot of the Yankees guys, Rizzo, Judge, Stanton, guys like Torres, guys like that are guys who hit the low ball really well. And second batter of the inning, he throws a low one to Aaron Judge, and Judge creamed it. I mean, absolutely creamed it. And Alex Wood is fine. He's been okay. He struggles at times finding the strike zone. There's like certain innings where he just like cannot find the strike zone. So overall, the pitching has to be better. This is what was supposed to be our strength, and it's not right now. The hitting is so inconsistent. It's hard for a pitcher to kind of like, okay, what am I going to get out of these guys? But if you're consistent, I think the Giants have guys, and they've proven it now, that can get on base or can at least get, make the other opposing team uncomfortable. But when you're losing, 10-5 or, 12-4 or 9-1, whatever it is, it's hard for a pitcher to have that confidence or even not groove one just to see what happens because you're losing so bad. So the pitching needs to get better. Yes, the hitting needs to be more consistent, but we figured that the pitching was going to be the best thing. And that's the issue with the Giants right now is their pitching is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And I do want to say this. I like Blake Sable. I hope he's here to stay. I think he's been an energetic type of a guy that I think the Giants need. Joey Bart, though, I want to talk about him because he was supposed to start the year as the starting catcher. Then it was Roberto Perez, like out of nowhere, and then we found out that Bart was hurt. Perez goes down with a season-ending injury. Now that we found out, and Bart has come in and he's played really well so far. He's actually been playing really well, and his arm. He was never drafted for his arm behind the plate or just being behind the plate in general. He is gunning guys out right now. There was the throw that he had against James Outman. James Outman had that steal. I mean, he absolutely had it, but just because Joey Bart threw the perfect throw, got him out. It was incredible. So I want to give a shout out to Joey Bart because I'm really pushing for the guy. I'm really pulling for him. I hope he continues to do what he's doing because he is a really bright spot if he continues it. We re-signed Darren Ruff for some reason. We really like Darren Ruff, but hey, we fleeced the Mets on that deal. So
for sure.
I don't care. But Crawford has been hitting really well. David VR has been hitting really well. Estrada, I hope he gets a little bit better, but he hasn't been terrible. Bryce Johnson, I was really worried about him. Now he could be hurt, so we don't really know what's going on with him. But Yastrzemski has started off really hot. Michael Conforto, my God.
Yeah,
that looks like a steal right now because he was out all of last year with an injury. That's why he was never signed, and people were still worried about it. Giants took a chance on him because we wanted to sign him last year. Take a chance on him this year. He's crushing the ball right now. He's one of our best hitters right now, which kind of sad. But and then Elliot Ramos, I hope he stays because I feel like he's getting more and more confident as the games go by. Yeah. And I hope that the Giants give him a chance a little bit longer than they did last year because I think he's got enough talent to do it. He's fast. His defense is a little lack thereof defense. But when he starts swinging the bat, he starts swinging it well. I don't know if he could ever be a 20 home run guy. I thought maybe he could, but it kind of is starting to seem like he's going to be more of that like 15, 18 range. But, as long as he's getting on base, whether it be via hit or a walk, we'll take it. So
Ramos is probably going to be like a 210. I think he could get to 20 home runs. He just has to see enough at bats, but he's going to have to do it at the DH. I agree. I don't think his defense is that great. Are you concerned with Jock Peterson? I mean, he has not had the greatest of starts so far.
I'm not too concerned. He's a veteran hitter. He'll get it right. Some guys start. I mean, Brandon Belt was notorious for starting off always hot. Every year he was always a guy who was like hitting over 300. I mean, he would get to 10 home runs by the middle of May.
Yeah,
you're just like, oh, dude, he would be like crushing it. And then all of a sudden he would have an injury or he just had a random slump and then he kind of never really truly got out of it. And so that's just kind of what he was notorious for. Peterson has never been a guy who was a big average hitter. Now last year he hit really well. And I think they thought maybe if we just have him focus specifically DHing. But I think they kind of need his defense a little bit more. I know they kind of want to move him at first base every now and then, but I kind of feel like they need to play him a little bit more in the field. And I think they're trying to rotate a lot of guys in the outfield, and that's kind of what they're running into because like sometimes they have Sable out there, Bryce Johnson, Ramos, Conforto, Yastrzemski. So they gotta maneuver all these guys. So I understand.
It feels like they're outfield heavy.
Kind of, but kind of not. Like specifically located, their position as outfielder, there's like only 4 on there. But when you talk about it, they have like 6 or 7, or in Lamont Wade Jr.
Right.
So they have like 7 guys rotating in the outfield, and also in the infield. So they just really went utility guy heavy, and that's kind of what they're going with this year. Which, listen, I understand what they're trying to do. They're not trying to spend a ton of money. They're trying to save for Ohtani. They wanted to try and sign Correa, obviously the whole ordeal. But if you're the Giants and you're looking that this team is not playing well, and Ohtani has struggled with being on the Angels, this is not where you want to be, because it doesn't look like Ohtani is going to want to go to another non-competitor. If he's going to leave the Angels, might as well leave for a team that's going to be competitive. And that's my issue, because yes, I understand the Giants could probably outbid most, if not everyone. At the same time, you have to be kind of competitive, and we're not.
Yeah, I got to be honest, man. You're gonna hate this, but I don't think the Giants are getting Ohtani. I'm right now. I'm with you. I think they still have a chance if they can kind of pull it together. Sure.
But again, they're going to have to also let Ohtani know, hey, listen, we're getting this. We're going to go after this guy as well, and they're going to have to sign other people. But it's hard because their priority is going to be Ohtani.
Right.
And let's say they do sign Ohtani, they could miss out on a few other guys because they're focusing on Ohtani. So that's going to be the other issue.
Right.
But the Giants are going to have to do something. Hopefully they do something maybe at the trade deadline that might be okay. But I just right now, I don't really know who they would go after, because right now they're not competitive. They're not going to be a team that's going to be fighting for a playoff spot right now. So.
Yeah. And I don't know, Ohtani may look at their pitching roster and not want to go just because first off, he would be the ace. That's not the issue, but who would he be in the bullpen with? Who would be the closer? Can he trust them with the lead? I don't know. I don't know if the Giants have enough pieces right now. If I'm the Giants, I think Ohtani's cool, but let's be honest, it's kind of like the worst kept secret. Everyone's going to go be bidding for him, and Giants probably aren't going to be like in Ohtani's like favorite list when it all comes and it's all said and done. I think the Giants should look to bolster up the pitching, like start rebuilding that, because like what you were mentioning, the bullpen is still weak. We still have control issues. I'm wondering if maybe the pitch clock is throwing off the rhythm to a lot of these pitchers, because before they used to settle down and maybe, okay, let's collect our thoughts and let's get the out. Now, because of this pitching clock, you don't have the timeouts anymore. You can't lollygag around. You got to just move on. And it's not enough time for them to process what's going on to where they can make the adjustments. They're almost like going through the motions and hoping that something happens where the defense gets them out of it, or maybe the batter makes a mistake. But what's happening is these batters are too focused and the pitchers aren't making the right adjustments when they need to in the right moment, just from what I'm seeing. But again, I could be talking out of turn, but I feel like the Giants need to go back to the drawing board and start over with pitching and go from there. And that might mean spending money on somebody other than Ohtani, especially if the hitters can find a way to get you a lead, get on base, get you enough momentum to get a run or two. That's great. But they need the pitching to keep that lead.
I think the Giants are bright enough to say, we're going to go after Ohtani, but we're really going to we're going to make sure that our team is good. Like, I think they do understand that it is an outsider's chance of getting Ohtani. If they would have gotten Judge, I think that would have, or even Carlos Correa would have definitely helped.
Yeah.
But now that they don't, and now they look this. Now, I agree with you. I think the pitch count has messed with some pitchers, specifically Taylor Rogers. Last night I was watching the game and he got called for, I think it was like twice. And he just looked out of sorts. And when you're going through it, and then also getting called for a pitch clock and, getting 2 balls called on you when you haven't thrown a pitch, that's tough. It's rough. But you know what? That's the way the game is played, and so you're going to have to get used to it. And hopefully they get it right. I think they could figure it out, but we'll definitely see what happens. But I hope and I think that the Giants are smart enough to say, listen, we understand, it's an outsider's chance of getting Ohtani. We're going to make this team better. We're going to build like we could possibly get Ohtani, but we're also going to build a team that is going to be good. We're going to have to spend money, and they're going to have to, because Giants fans are not going to be able to take much more of this terrible, pitching, and then have one game where we just score 0 runs, and then all of a sudden we have this one game where we're absolutely, we're hitting 13 home runs in a freaking series, but it was only actually in 2 games, which unheard of. But
right,
it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be that inconsistent. I think we have the players who have been around at least somewhat long enough to be able to be a little more consistent. Right now, we're not.
Yep.
All right, folks, that's it. I am very sorry it is a long-winded episode, but you know what? We have in a couple of weeks since, and this was, as Cody had mentioned earlier, this is kind of this was an 8th inning decision where we didn't know if we were going to need the closer, and we ended up having to throw in the closer. We didn't know if we were going to throw him in for a 6-out save or a 3-out save. So, but we made it work. We came to the end. We got the save. So there you go. That's a baseball term. If no one understands what I was just saying, you obviously don't watch the show enough. So, or listen to the show enough. So
we need a baseball translator when you give all that.
I mean, you understood what I was saying.
I totally understood what you said.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as you got it, whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter. But I appreciate everyone listening. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you so much for the love and support. I promise you, once Andrew starts living in his own house, this is going to be a more consistent show. But as of right now, it's just kind of hard to know what we're doing every single day. So sorry about that. It is completely on me. But you know what? I don't think really anyone was too upset, of course, other than Cody. And he's not even that upset. So It's all right. So we appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Go check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please follow us, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where Cody does a great job putting videos up there. Even though I don't know if you've put up videos in a while, but when we are actually on live, then we usually have some videos up there. So it's, again, not his fault, it's my fault. But we have some really good videos if you want to go check them out and kind of see what we're all about here. And then that was disgusting, Cody. And then you distracted me on that one. Go check out
for the audio listeners.
Rub it. I'm not even gonna say it. There's no point in it. Anyway, then go subscribe and rate and review our podcast at all the major podcast sites, that being Spotify, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio as well. So please subscribe, and then also rate and review. Anything and everything does help. If it's 5-star, let us know what you liked. And if it's a 1-star, let us know what you didn't like, so we can fix it and get better as a show. And then also go check out, we have 3 partners. We have FNX Fit, which is a great workout gear, great workout supplements. Please go check them out. Use our code that you can see on the description on this episode on the podcast. Or you can go to our website, which is drewcodesportstalk.com, or you can go to the social media sites where you can get all the discounts that you can get from FNX Fit. Also, go check out Fanatics, where they always have deals. We don't really have a deal code, but they're always doing deals. So just use our link that we have on there, which will help support the podcast. And then SeatGeek. Go check them out. If you use SeatGeek, if you've never used SeatGeek before and you use SeatGeek, use our code where you can actually get $20 off your very first purchase by just using SeatGeek for the very first time. So please go check all those partners out. We thank you to all you partners. We appreciate all the love and support from everyone. Cody, I'm going to let you sign it off.
Well, guys, that's it. Thank you. Drew, you're right. I'm not mad. Really not a big deal. I'm glad we're able to do this, and no fault of your own. You've got a house you're literally renovating. And so, yeah, in due time, guys, we will be back to our top level production. But until then, you guys have to listen to our sexy voices and get over it. So all good. Again, as what Drew had mentioned, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. We'll catch you guys next time. And yeah, I think that's it, man. So signing off. Good night. And Drew, I'll see you in the morning.
You're so terrible at signing off.
Goodbye, everybody. See ya.
See ya.